Hello, everyone. Welcome back to The Sensitivity Doctor. This is Dr. Amelia Kelley. Today, I talked to Marni Battista, who is a relationship coach turned radical living warrior. She talks about her newest book and how asking yourself 7 spiritual questions can help guide your life. If you want to know whether this episode is for you, I ask you to think about your current life and if you have moments where you want to either run away, pull out your hair, or completely reinvent your life and you don't know how. I think she really breaks this down in such a compassionate way, but also with some literal practical things you can do today to get you started. So I hope you enjoy the episode. I hope you get inspired and decide to stop shooting all over yourself, as she puts it. Enjoy, everyone. Well, I'm glad you're back. I don't think I remember the last time we saw each other was easily a year ago.
Yeah, I remember. It's so weird. I remember certain episodes, and I remember where I was recording it and where I was sitting. I was sitting in my. I didn't have this set up, and anyway, it's just funny. Yeah, and it was such a fun episode.
Yay! Yeah, you were in like a woodsy.
Yeah, same house, but in my kitchen. But now I turned this into an office. Thank God.
Nice.
Yeah.
Well, and I see your new book there, so that's what we are here to chat about. Woo-hoo. So, can you tell anyone listening today what your book's about, what inspired you to write it, and maybe even a little bit about who in the world you are?
Who in the world am I?
Who in the world are you?
So I love this question because I've been writing a lot about all the different ways I've reinvented myself over my lifetime. And so the who am I and what am I has shifted so much.
Cool. Okay.
Yeah. And so I would say I was a dating and relationship coach only to the outside world for about 14 years. Super successful in that. Easy for me. I did that because that was the thing that I had to figure out. I met my husband, my second husband. We've been together for 16 years. The thing is, Amelia, that people would come to me. I'd help them find the guy. And because it was an inside out job, they sort of discovered their own who am I. And as they began that journey, they continued working with me to the extent that they started to redesign their whole life. And a lot of that was their work life and renegotiating their relationship with work. So for so many, many clients, they downsized a business, they exited corporate and created a consulting gig, they retired early, they did all those things. And I was going to say, how old was I then? 54. I got into, right before the world started hoarding toilet paper, I got into a really bad, near crippling ski accident in Canada. And that left me pretty much in bed, unable to move for about 9 to 10 weeks.
Wow. And I did not know that.
Yeah. I broke my sacrum in 7 places.
Oh, no, there were that many places to break a sacrum.
Yeah, it's a small little thing. Yeah. And so it's kind of crazy. So if your hips are like that, it's your tailbone, I guess.
Yeah.
And there's so many stories inside of that. But ultimately, in that space, I couldn't do anything. And I really hit me that I was a human doing, not a human being. And that if I couldn't do who am I, it was COVID. My kids came back. My adult kids came back. Then they left because they were like, oh, this isn't just a couple week thing.
Yeah, this is not a vacation.
Yeah, we're returning to life. I was arguing with my husband. He wanted to move. He hated LA. He was like, I've waited all these years for the kids to leave. Like, let's go. I was like, no, no, no. And also I wasn't healing properly. And I went to the spine person, the surgeon, the doctor, and he was like, no, you're fine. I'm like, well, I still can't walk without pain. And he was like,
oh man,
you good? Bye.
I feel like too many doctors, no offense to doctors listening, kind of do that where they're like, well, this is the ceiling where you're at. And that's where you're at.
It's, it's kind of like for me, if someone talks about something, like someone asked me yesterday about psilocybin therapy, I was like, that is beyond my scope. I have no opinion. Right. And so he was like, I don't know, your bones are fused back. That's just so not holistic. Anyway, that set me on this journey of like, what the hell is wrong with me? And I became really clear in that journey that I had broken the sacrum, which is the foundation of our physical self, because I had lived my whole life as a human doing, and that I was not an integrated being, and I was living from my neck up, and that I had to rebuild everything
Yeah.
just like I had to rebuild. And it
Right.
was that healing that actually created the physical healing. And the journey I went on to then figure out who am I now is the book.
Awesome.
Yeah. And so I was like, well, how do I figure this out? And I went online, I was researching, and all that came up were like, like empty nest stuff or transition coaching. And I was like, no, it's not that. And it's not that. And that's when I realized I had to kind of make my own. That's kind of what I did with dating, to be honest. I was like, none of these methods work. I'm going to invent my own based on what I know works for me. And so I did that. My husband and I ended up selling our house. We lived in for 26 years, buying an RV and living in it for a year, and traveling around the country to really figure out and answer the question, what blows my hair back, and redesign our life and our relationship. And so that's the framework of the story, my own personal journey through the country. I first heard that term in a book by a woman named, I think her name's Sherry Salata. She was the executive producer for Oprah for a million years. And she wrote a book about her deciding to quit and going on her own personal journey. And when I read that, I was like, and I was like, what blows my hair back? And at the time, I was like, peak experiences. And that was really part of the conversation I had with my husband. And so I think it's a good thing for listeners to do is to think about, like, go back for the last 10 years of your life and make a list of all your peak experiences. And then
Oh,
look
I
for
love
the
that.
patterns. And when Jeremy and I both did that, and we did it separately, we came back together, and it's part of this life design process that can help you escape your corporate gig or whatever it is and kind of redesign your life. We both had the same thing. We were like, moments in nature with people we love. And then that was like, that led to the RV of like, well, why do we only do that like 2 times a year for two? Why is that my life? Like, why
Right.
aren't the peak experiences my whole life? I can create that if I choose to go on that adventure. And
Mm-hmm.
we did.
Do you think you would have peaked out in the RV if your kids were still home?
What do you mean peaked out?
Like, would you have gone on that adventure if the kiddos were still home? Or do you think it's something that, like, you had the space to do because you guys were empty nesters?
For sure. But what I talk about in the book is like, this isn't about like, you have to do something like sell your house or move. It's
Right.
right. It's really about how do you start creating a life outside the shoulds. It's how do I say screw the should life, and what am I going to start doing that feels radical for me? And that might just be saying like no to being a people pleaser. It might be trying to figure out how to change your home environment so that it feels more aligned. It's how do I get honest with myself about what's not working and take action to choose that? What am I doing because society or my people who raised me told me this is what I'm supposed to do? And that's really what it is.
Yeah.
I could have told if my kids were in a certain time in their life, I could have totally seen
Taking them.
seen doing that. But the truth is, like, I and they did come visit us like
Mm-hmm.
over the course of
Fun.
the year, which was super cool. And the whole RV thing was actually inspired by one of my kids who during
Oh,
COVID
cool.
ended up renting a Sprinter van, like a cheapy van, and went around the country with her boyfriend. And then my other daughter did that in New Zealand, and I was like, why am I not doing that? Was it? I'm like, why do we leave the adventures to the people that are young or the people that are very old? And that was really true for the people that we met in the RV life.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of them were older, and they looked at us and they were like, you guys are smart, because my biggest regret is that I waited so long to do this.
Oh, I love that. It's funny. I remember I do not live very close to a golf course, but apparently there's this like one family here that loves to drive 2 miles to the golf course in their cart. And I remember one day being in our front living room and we're volleying the young kids and we're just kind of like shooting ourselves all over the place. And I saw them drive by and they looked so free and light. And I looked at at Andrew, my husband, and I was like, gosh, they look like I looked in high school. And I was like, one day we'll look like that. And I kind of giggled about it. And I'm saying this as someone who has I've designed my life in such a way where I work hard and I play hard. Like I have a lot of kind of dichotomy with that because it works for me. So I do ensure that I don't shit all over myself all month. But it was even just that little, like, kind of cultured thought process. Like, oh, yeah, when I'm that old, I'll jump in the golf cart. Not at all my desire, by the way. I don't golf.
Right,
But
right, right. That freedom.
yeah, that, like, whatever, that vibe. Yeah, totally. I love that. So something I thought really interesting about your book is that it doesn't stop at, okay, so here's a way I felt that I didn't like. Here's a really crazy experience with, the medical issue that you had. And I can't help but say, when you were saying that, I'm thinking of the chakra system and, like, our,
Yes.
our root and all of that. And if you're stuck up in the head all the time, that's where, kind of those upper chakras are, and anxiety and even medical issues like sinus infections and migraines and all of these things, if you're all stuck up in that space, can happen. But I love that your book also, and this new reinvention of yourself that you have taken, is also integrating things like the benefits of radically transforming with neuroscience and somatics. And like you didn't stop just at, hey, here's a good idea. You
Right.
kind of unpacked a little bit about the nuts and bolts. So I would love if you could expand on that a little bit.
Yeah, totally. So one of the one of the things that really hit me was like, okay, so part of the why of my being and my
Mm-hmm.
doing was very, very different, right? My doing was because I believed at the time that if I continued to do certain things, then I would achieve success and then I would be happy and then
Mm-hmm.
my problems would go away.
Sounds pretty linear.
Yeah, and I think that's why people wait to do stuff until
Mm-hmm.
right?
Right.
And so part of this awareness or awakening for me was that I needed a brand new way to define success
Okay.
because the other way was the ladder to nowhere, the climb to nowhere, right? Like the goalpost that always is moved. I was watching an episode of White Lotus last night, and there's a scene where they're in a monastery and they're talking to this like monk guy, and he's saying like, "Oh, haha, you believe that if you do, get more, you'll be happy." That's not true, right? And that's sort of it, right? And so, right after my dad had died, I happened to go to a religious service. Just it was like the beginning of the Jewish New Year. I was listening to this sermon, and the rabbi was teaching about these questions that you're asked. The story goes at the gates of heaven, and they're around. Did you lead a meaningful life? And so I was like thinking about my dad. And I was like, did my dad lead a meaningful life? Because at my end of my dad's life, he was half conscious, like mumbling about credit card bills and desperately trying to get into check his email. And I was sort of
Oh,
like, oh
wow.
God, is that how I want? Like,
Oh my goodness. To carry
I
that fear and anxiety with you there
to the very end,
to
right?
that
And so
space. Yeah.
I was thinking about my dad, and this is a great, again, if you're listening to this, judging my dad, but really I was avoiding asking myself that question. And I was like, wait, am I leading a meaningful life? Like and so when I found those questions, I became obsessed with them. And I ultimately decided, and it's a daily challenge, right, to reorient success to these 7 spiritual questions. So I teach those questions in the book because when you go through transformation, when you live a courageous life, when you're doing something radical to you, which it can be like saying no to the
Yeah.
family reunion, which I just did yesterday. It's hard. And I have so many clients right now who are doing the big thing, and it's hard. It's scary. It's terrifying. So what I learned in the RV is like if I don't have a different metric of success, I will never be able to navigate this. And so these 7 questions are really a way to redefine success and to strive to live this kind of a life, which requires self-responsibility, and then have a different sort of set of aspirations.
So in your book, you did something really, I don't know, really grounding and powerful, which was taking spirituality, which we all have our own definitions of, and a lived experience you had, and leading the readers through how to use certain questions to guide their life. Can you tell me about that?
Yeah. So these 7 spiritual questions are a way to redefine success in a way that is within your control, and that also allows you to find joy in the journey, right? So that we're not waiting until we hit those milestones.
Right.
One of the things that I think is really important to create a shift and to actually embody these questions, right? Is the bottom line is, how do we train our brain to change, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60 years of programming, right? So it's the tools that are rooted in neuroscience, which is like, how do we rewire our brains? How do we recognize the inner critical voice? One of the things I talk about in my book is what I call the alligator. And the reason I call it the alligator is because we were in a Walmart in Hilton Head, and there was an alligator in the parking lot.
Wait,
And
where are you from again? Hilton Head is kind of near my neck of the
well,
woods,
we
I
were
think.
in the RV.
Oh,
Yeah,
okay.
we stopped in Hilton Head,
Too bad
right?
I didn't know you then.
Yeah, I know, right? We could have hung out.
Mhm,
And
mhm,
so the whole time you're in the state, there's like, beware of alligators, alligators, alligators. And I was like, where's the damn alligators? I was looking in the water for the alligators, right?
mhm.
But there it was in the Walmart,
In the
um,
Walmart.
in the Walmart parking lot.
Oh, the Walmart, but still.
Yeah, but still, 100%. Yeah, that's the
Oh
point of the
my
story.
gosh.
You're like, right? And so the story that I teach in there is that the voice, that inner critic, is often not where you think it is, right? But it shows up in the damnedest places. And in that story, I talk about how everyone was paralyzed by the alligator. Like, everyone stopped going into the Walmart. People were pointing. Cars weren't moving. Like, and that's what that voice does. It paralyzes us. And in that moment, my husband and I are like, wait, we could spend our whole day doing this, but like, we have an agenda. And so we like went into the Walmart and left the crowds to solve the problem.
I love that.
And so, but that inner critical voice, I love this because I've had so many people not into personal development, know nothing about it, just start talking to me about like, that was the alligator. I know that's the alligator. I overcame the alligator. And so the neuroscience is, so then how do we recognize this voice? And then how do we start to make the change to not believe it and to start creating a new identity and a new way of thinking and a new belief, and to keep going on, to carry on in the
Right.
midst of the change, right? Or the fear or the challenge. And you cannot think your way out of your thoughts.
No.
Right. And so somatics, for those who don't know, is like, how do you engage your physical self? If you've ever heard of the book, The Body Keeps the Score, now breath work is a really big thing, right? Whatever the flavor of the day is, Gestalt therapy, they're all involving your physical self. So this is not a
Right.
new thing. They just get called different things and they get probably better. But ultimately, if you just, think about something and highlight it, it's harder to change your neural wiring. So in the book, I teach you different things that aren't weird, that to actually engage in a felt sense, a felt experience of
Right.
changing your beliefs.
I'm obsessed with this whole topic because it aligns very well with like how, as a therapist, I operate. And there's a couple little things I say to my clients that were popping in my head when I was listening to you. And one of them is when I try to help someone understand the fact that when you focus on the thing you want to change, and sometimes if you want to stop focusing on the thing you want to change, the way our thought patterns work. And so I'll say, okay, I want you, all of you who are, walking or listening in your car or wherever you are, I want you to not think of a giant pink elephant. Like,
Right.
don't think of a pink elephant. Stop thinking about a pink elephant. And it's like, we can't. That's not the way our brains operate. And so I love that it sounds like you're leaning a little bit more into like radical acceptance and awareness and the mindfulness piece. And it also makes me think, in the time I've been a therapist, I've seen this dramatic shift because it's been about 20 years now. This dramatic shift from when I first started, not only did we call our clients consumers, by the way.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yes, that was like early 2000s. We used to call clients consumers, which I found very odd. Client still feels a little clinical to me, but at least it's like, okay, I am here to serve you type of thing.
Right.
That give you of my container and energy. But so that was interesting. But I remember at the time that I started CBT, which is still, I joke, there's CBT for everything. There's
Right.
CBT for not, cleaning up your house. There's CBT for not sleeping. There's CBT for everything. But it was all that when I first started. And I've seen this shift. You brought up a couple of my favorite books, like Body Keeps the Score and Breath Work. Is that a book, or you're just saying
No,
breath
I'm
work
just
in
talking about
general?
generally right now.
Oh,
We're
okay, yeah.
moving energy, right? They're
Right,
just techniques, right? Whether it's
right.
tapping, EFT,
Love it.
EMDR, right?
We're not excluding the body anymore, which we
Yes.
shouldn't, because the body is what becomes the body and the brain, first of all, are all one thing, are what become traumatized. So yes, I love the approach that you're taking. A neat little like brain nerd moment about creativity is that the area of your brain that's designed for creativity is also connected to the area that fires when you're being compassionate.
Love that.
The area of the brain that's related to critical thinking quiets the compassion creative brain. So you quite literally neurologically can't effectively do both at the same time, be critical and be creative.
Which is, okay. I love this so much because I'm teaching like a leadership class right now, and we're talking about as a leader in your business, in your life, whatever it is, as a mom, like when you're beating yourself up and judging everyone and everything, then it's really
Right.
hard to access the part of your brain that makes great decisions, that can create solutions. And so when
Right.
you unlock that, you're like, woo, like you got a superpower. And one of the questions is, what did you create? That's one of the to creating a meaningful life. What did you create? And I don't mean art projects. I mean, yes, art projects are amazing, right? But you can create new thoughts, you can create new ideas, create new relationships, you can create connection,
Totally.
there's a million things you can create, right? And so when you're taking that last breath, I want everyone who reads this book to be reflecting and like, look at all the stuff I created. Look at the legacy I created. Not like, oh shit, I still have $10,000 left on my credit card.
Totally. That's
Which
the
I think
time
is
to,
what my dad was worried about.
wow, like a thinking pattern that's so bogged down. I wonder, how would you handle, okay, I had a client yesterday and I had such an empathy moment for her. She comes in and she is just like, it is too much. I just want to walk away. I just don't want to be in this life right now. But she works at a very prestigious company. She's got a marriage. She has two very young kids. She also, I feel for her, is highly sensitive. So all of this is just a lot of stimulation. I'm sure she would love to jump in an RV and leave. How would you support someone who is just so in it to apply the radical living that you're talking about?
So thank you for asking this question. I also have a client. They might be neighbors. They should hang out. So, and this is really my thing. How do you do that? You cannot blow your life. She can't blow her life up. She's not in the stage or phase where she can just jump in an RV. You don't have to
Right.
Thelma and Louise it, move to Bali, get a divorce, whatever it is. So the design thinking model that's in the book is based on Stanford's design thinking model of new product development, right? And so I would tell this client like, okay, look, we need to redesign your life. Like, you don't invent the latest iPhone in 5 minutes. It's a process, right? And so in this model, we're just switching out. You are the user of the product, and the product you're developing is your ideal life. And it's going to take a minute. But like, if we do this process, you're actually going to start to enjoy your life again because you'll be creating. So one of the first things I have people do in the book is to start to track time, meaning not how much time you're doing something, but in this way, on a daily basis. I say 7 days in the book. because I want to make it easy. But if you could do it for 14, that's great. Just because our weekends, like one time we have a relaxing weekend and one time we have a crazy weekend, or
Good
we were
point.
sick or we were on vacation, whatever it is. But you're going to go through everything you do. You can put it in your phone, journal, whatever, your calendar, and you're going to rank it 1 to 5, 5 being high energy, meaning I was in flow, high energy flow. Like, this is easy for me. Like, time stops, like, I'm just doing my thing. And where am I engaged in engagement? Now, here's the difference. People always ask me this. I was talking to a founder of a business the other day, and she was like, I can be super engaged in the meeting about our financials. Like, I can be engaged, but I am not in flow. This is hard for me. It's not my natural thing. I don't like this. I want to poke my eyeballs out with a fork.
Work.
I hate it, but I'm engaged, right? So you go through and you're like 1 to 5. What am I doing, right? And then you collect a bunch of data, which is part of the design thinking model, your users. You interview, right? It's called the empathy phase. And you're not judging. You're not trying to, and this is really important for people into personal development, because I've done this with so many people, and they're like, oh, I realized I have these, ones and twos, but if I change the way I think about them, maybe I could make them a 4 and the 5, right? Like, and I'm like, that's not the purpose here. We're not trying to silver lining, right size, reframe. No, we want to look at those 1s and 2s, and we want to find the patterns, and we want to look at the 4s and the 5s, and we want to find the patterns. And then what you do is you create what I call your soul map, which I walk you through in the book, to find out what the things are that you love, that are high engagement, high flow. You look for the patterns of how you best carry those things out. One-on-one, small group, outside, inside, with plenty of light, after a great night's sleep, whatever the how is. And then the why. What were the things that you were doing that lit you up or didn't, as they pertain to your core motivations? So here's my favorite example. I talk about this in the book when I did this the first time. It's a very simple thing, but it's cooking. I was like, sometimes cooking is a 5, sometimes it's a 1. Same activity, right?
But what I about parenting.
Yeah, exactly.
Sometimes it's a 5, sometimes it's a negative 1.
So what I did was I looked at the how and the why. So when I'm cooking and the how is like, it's collaborative, or there's people around and we're talking and there's music playing and it's a vibe, it's a 5. I'm connecting with people. I created a moment. When I'm the cooking bitch and I'm just in the kitchen and everyone else is having fun or whatever it is, or I'm not having fun, like there's no creativity in the cooking. I'm just like executing a task. It's a 1. Okay. So as you go through this, you might be like, so looking at parenting and being like, how is it being carried out that makes it feel like a 5? What's the core motivation? For me, it's connection, or like being your servant, right? That's how I feel in the 1s. And so what you do is you start to collect this data. And when you look at all your what's, all your hows, and all your whys, what you've done is you've created what I call your soul map, which is a evolving thumbprint of your soul. This is the one and only you. So what I would tell that client is we would go through the soul map, and I walk you through this in the book, and then you go, cool, how can I start creating more 5 moments in my life? That's it. So here's a great example. I had a client who did this, and we looked at all her meetings. She had back to back meetings. The pattern we recognized is that when she has no breaks, because she's trying to be efficient, and they're just one after another. They start 5, by 2:00, everything's a 1.
Gotcha. Yeah, so you see the transition point.
She's like, oh my God, I need to create buffers. Also, I need to actually start looking at batching these different kinds of meetings so that my brain is in this mode on Tuesday mornings, and on Thursday afternoons, I try to have more of the thinking time. I had a client I did with this the other day. She's like, realizing she has no time to actually think about her business. So when's she doing it? At 10 p.m. when her body hits the pillow.
Do you know what I love about this is I'm thinking about that client, and something she recognized was that, and now I have a way to quantify this, that what she was recognizing is that in the morning when she had to get the kids out of the house, what used to be like a 3. It still it was still a little cumbersome. I mean, no one loves brushing snarly hair and yelling at people to put their shoes on. But before, when her husband used to go out to the gym and wasn't there to break up her flow, it was probably like a 3. But now he changed his schedule and he's back in the house in the morning, and the energy of both of them together is just too much. Like, it's more stressful. And she was thinking, I need to talk to him and see if he could move his workout time so he's not there in the morning. And I think before it was just shoulding. Like, I should go talk to him about this because this will make things easier. And which is still not bad. It's still a good motivator.
Yeah.
But I feel like what you're doing is taking what we might be able to see in our life and making it less about like a task, like something I should do because this is the right choice, and making it more, giving the language of, okay, so and so, I'm not going to say his name, but okay, so and so, I really feel like I was aligning more with myself and the children when you were at the gym in the morning. And I was at a 3, almost a 4 some mornings. And I'm noticing I'm at like a 1 or a 2. Like, it almost allows people to have those conversations without getting
Yes.
personal too.
You could say, you know what I realized is like for my unique gift, like what blows my hair back is like creating like my little team, right? Like I'm the manager, the kids are like my employees. And when I can be in flow and we have systems and everyone has their roles and responsibilities, it blows my hair back. And I also think the kids like having one person to report to. Right. And it's right. And that's just how my soul operates. Like, this is just the juju. So what could we do, so that I could do that? Because honestly,
Yes.
that is when I'm thriving.
I'm so happy you brought up the word honest as well, and honesty, because that was something else that I find just in your energy. There's a lot of honest, authentic energy in general, and also what you were covering in the book. So honesty is something that, I mean, we can look at it differently, right? Like, if we're looking at telling someone else, quote, the truth. But I feel like the way you're talking about it is so much deeper, because without being able to step back and look at yourself and be honest with yourself, I don't think any of the other things that you're talking about even clicks.
Yeah. So it's so interesting. I was out jogging in Hawaii this last December,
As you do,
as one does. And I was like feeling it, dude. I was like, hey, earphones on, right? By the way, I'm not like a big runner, but I was just like feeling
You're
it.
like,
The ocean, the
I
vibe.
felt that block, and I just
did. I was just like, whatever. Anyway, and there's this giant man in a like lands greenskeeping public park truck, golf cart actually,
Oh,
but it was
full
for
circle.
maintenance.
For work. Yeah.
And he goes, "Hey," and I'm like, "Oh God." My body went like, "Oh God," because I'm used to living in Los Angeles, where I lived for 25 years. Where like if someone approaches,
Says, hey.
you're like, what do I have to do to make this go away? And I was like, and he was like, there's turtles over there. I'm going to answer your question.
No.
I
was like,
and-
I'm intrigued. I'm in.
Okay. And I was like, what, turtles? So I stopped, right? And there was just a massive, like the little noses. It was just they're everywhere.
Right.
And their little shells were getting crashed against the waves because it was the early morning. And apparently they don't care. They were just like knocking into each other. They were living their best life. Anyway, and so we started talking, as one does, because we were having a moment in nature. And he told me about his life and how he survived the Lahaina fire and how his wife had died a week before. And how
From you talking.
The week before the fire.
A week before the fire. Okay, I'm glad I asked. But still, geez.
That's a lot. But what he said was, this was such a blessing because I could not have carried my wife out of the house and survived. We both would have perished.
Oh my gosh. Wow.
And he's like, I wouldn't want my wife to die that way.
Wow. What a total shifting reframe. I have goosebumps.
Yeah.
That's wild.
So we started talking. So I started talking about surrender and acceptance, and I told him I was writing this book and it was coming out and whatever. And he was a very spiritual man, and obviously, and he said started talking about the 10 Commandments, and he said, the first 4 commandments, you know what they're about? And I'm not religious, and I'm not knowledgeable except for what I researched for this book. And he goes, they're about your relationship with God. And then the other 6 are your relationship with other people. And by the way, that might be switched around. But I was like, I didn't know that, right? Like how you treat others, your relationship with God. And we finished the conversation and kept running. And I was like, and the 7 questions are about the relationship with yourself.
Like tack it right on.
I was like, because I always been joking that if these 7 questions had a better publicist, people would know about them as much as you know about the 10 Commandments.
Right.
But the 10 Commandments, so now I'm like, oh my gosh, they're both serving this function, right? In ancient texts, right? They're teaching us, and I've universalized them, and so what does honesty have to do with that? Is that in the relationship with yourself, one of the questions is, were you honest, right? And I don't mean because in the original formation of these questions, it talks about, were you honest in business? Because in the old telling of the story, it was, if you're honest about money, then you would be more likely to be honest with other things in your life. But I was like, yes. And also, I think that's much harder to be honest with yourself than it is to return the thing that you found, just generally, right? Right. I think, and I'm not talking about sociopaths or narcissists or any of the ists or the paths. I'm talking about regular people. Being honest is genuinely more often than not. But self-honesty, radical self-honesty is way harder. And we put up with stuff and we tell ourselves stories and we tell ourselves lies all the time. And so if you're not going to be honest with yourself, it's really hard to do any of those other things, right? In that relationship with yourself. And also, if you're not honest with yourself, the parts of you, and you're an amazing therapist, and so the wounded child parts of yourself, it's hard to have self-trust if those parts of you are like, you're not taking care of me, right? Like you're not taking care of yourself. And so that is radical. Being radically for me to tell my cousins, honestly, guys, I'd rather go to Australia. I have a free place to stay. I want to see my in-laws. They're in their 80s. I love them. I love my cousins, but I see them once every 5 years. I had to say that. I had to say that for myself. Going to the reunion is a should. Going to go see my Australian family is something I really want to do.
It blows your hair back.
Blows my hair back, right? But it's hard. And she even said, our parents would be so disappointed. We always went to the reunion. Now we need to go and get our kids to go. And I was like, that is a giant should. I feel that, yes, but also not now.
Yeah.
But I
love that.
But I wanted to come up with all the reasons I haven't seen. And I was like, honestly, no, I just don't want to. I don't want to.
It sounds like for you, even starting a thought or a sentence with the words honestly can, even for folks who are not used to being radically honest, it can be really powerful. I will say really humorously, a turtle story. There's this walking loop near my office, and I was on a walk with a client. Started that during COVID, and some folks have just loved to continue it. And we saw this turtle that was just totally by itself, burrowing. It looked so lonely. And we're like, what is going on? Why is it so far from the pond? So we, thinking we know what's best for another turtle, and this is kind of like people thinking they know what's best for you, that you should go to the reunion. We pick up the turtle thinking we're serving the turtle, and we walk it back to the pond and say, go on, live your life. I'm walking with another client a couple hours later, and I proudly tell her this story, thinking that I saved this turtle's life.
Right.
She's a biologist, actually.
Oh,
and
no.
She's like, Amelia, I'm pretty sure that turtle was trying to lay eggs. I'm like, oh no, I ruined that turtle's life and its family.
Baby killer.
I know. But it kind of, metaphorically, it kind of makes me think of your cousin or whoever was calling and saying, totally. I know what's best for you. No one else knows your honesty like you know your honesty. If you're willing to pause and listen. And I think that's one of the things about folks who maybe have endured trauma and were trained to be more empathic for others. It's really hard to listen to yourself, which brings up my thought about who this podcast is really for at the heart of it. And that's people who are highly sensitive, or people who are not, but are in touch with that inner empath or that inner voice. I think it can be particularly difficult for HSPs who are so hyper-tuned to other people's feelings to do some of the things that we're talking about today. So I'm wondering for you, what do you think is maybe an added question or maybe a different way that a highly sensitive person should look at radical living so they too can do it?
Oh my gosh. That owning who you are and how you make those adaptations without shame is radical.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Yes.
It's like
Yes.
if you remove the should, then you're not like just remove the label. You're just there's, like you have that label so you can understand yourself, right? But what if there is nothing? I would say freedom is not having to be free from anything.
Freedom is not having to be free from anything. Okay.
Okay, so if
it.
you're HSP
Yeah.
and you don't need to be free from it because it just is, and that's your freedom, that's radical. And so you take this
Yeah.
book, girl, my friends, and you say, I want to do this my way and adapt it for me and figure out what's right. And the best thing I can say is that in the design thinking model, prototyping, right? When I just got an email or something and there's a new iPhone, they didn't just, they made a bunch of different ones. And the reason why there's a 16 is because every time they just kept testing and improving and learning from user data.
Yeah.
Right? Okay, so you're the user. So experimenting is part of radical living. And so anything you do, anything you try is an experiment. So for you and the way you experience the world, everything is an experiment. It's data. You assess, you adjust. It's a way of living. It's what I call being a creator. And so if you don't need to be free from your self-identification, right? Because it's just who you are and you love it. And you're like, this is me. And I'm just experimenting in the world, figuring out what works for me. Guess what? All of us are. So just make it yours. Karaoke that shit.
I love that. That is the ultimate growth mindset for sure.
Yeah.
Well, Marni, I loved sitting down and talking with you. It's been really neat because I see the transition. Like I see and feel the transition from when I first met you and what your focus was to like where you're at now. So I just want to say for anyone listening today, like this is so authentic and honest. You are being your turtle, making your nest. And I will come and destroy it.
And that was the metaphor for me. Besides the thing, I was like, look at those turtles. They're just getting thrown against the rocks. They came there on purpose, right? Because like whatever they do every morning there in that cove. And I was like, they good. They got a shell.
Yes.
They're resilient. So yeah.
Totally.
Get your turtle on.
Yes, get your turtle on. So everyone listening today, if they want to find your book and really work with you even, where could they look for you and what should they look out for?
The best thing to do is go to radicallivingchallenge.com.
Okay.
2 L's.
Awesome.
You'll find the book. You'll find me. I have a quiz there to self-identify in terms of your ability to create your dream life and what you need to do to get out of your own way.
Fabulous. Well, thank you so much, Marni, for coming today. It was really good seeing you. We'll have to stay connected.
Absolutely. I need to get back down to the Hilton Head area.
Awesome. All right. Well, I hope everyone enjoyed. Go live your life, get your turtle on, and be well, everyone.